How's it going, y'all? Megan with HneBadger Cosplay here, and today I wanted to share with you guys the new project that I'm working on, along with some fabrics that I happened to pick up. Alright, so for the big announcement, my next cosplay is actually going to be Aurora from League of Legends. I absolutely love her design. I'm a sucker for bunny girls in the first place, but once I saw her design, I knew immediately that I had to complete this cosplay. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you've probably already seen the announcement along with some works in progress that I'm currently doing. However, in order to get started, one of the first things that I did was take a look at my fabric stash. I have a whole bunch of fabrics that I usually keep in a plastic airtight container or an airtight bag, so I always like to go to that first to see if I already have stuff available. Unfortunately, I didn't have that much that I would be able to use, except maybe for some lining material. Everything else was not exactly what I was looking for. So one of the first things that you have to end up doing is I like to order swatches. So I end up ordering swatches from some of my favorite stores, and these usually are not too expensive, so that's one of the reasons why I appreciate them, because to be quite honest, you're never going to actually know how something looks until you receive some sort of sample. It's also a great opportunity in order to test the stretch of some of those items to see if it's going to actually be able to meet your needs. So there are a couple different places that I get my samples from. Some of my favorites are going to be FWD or Fabric Wholesale Direct. I really like them. Usually the shipping's pretty fast. I also really like Big Z Fabrics, which, especially for things like faux fur, it is really important to make sure that you get the color right. So I highly recommend getting a whole bunch of samples. But that's not the only place you can get them. There are also a whole bunch of new stores on places like Etsy that I really enjoyed taking a look at. And your samples are gonna come in different forms. This one is from New Fabrics Daily on Etsy. Again, just gives you a good idea of how much stretch or not stretch something has, or if it happens to have maybe a pattern or some sort of texture on it that you may not like. For things like golds, I think that it's probably one of the most important things you can do to get a whole bunch of samples, because golds have different colors, sheens, or undertones. Now, don't throw these away whenever you're done. Just because you don't like it for a specific project that you're currently working on doesn't mean that you can't use it for future projects. Perfect example, I have a nice big bag here of other samples that I've received for things like my Cassandra cosplay. I needed to see a whole bunch of different styles of blue in different fabrics and different weights. This is also really useful for maybe beginners who aren't able to look at the fabric content. The samples will not always come this big. This one I think is from Mood Fabrics, and it's actually quite large. System where I'm actually gonna take these swatches, write down where I got them, the price per yard, and all that fun stuff. That way, whenever I'm trying to look for that fabric again in the future, as long as it's not discontinued, I can always go back to my hopefully binder to be able to get an idea of a specific fabric. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some of the fabrics that I got. Speaking of Etsy, one of the things that I really like about Etsy is sometimes you don't need an entire yard of fabric. Sometimes you need it for just a very, very small piece. One example is on Aurora's bag. She has a velvet strap that goes around her bag to hold it closed. I didn't need an entire yard of velvet, nor did I want to buy an entire yard of red velvet. Going on Etsy, I was able to find just 1/8 of a yard, which is perfect because I really don't need that much material. It saves you a whole bunch of money, especially for expensive fabrics like velvet, where maybe you can splurge on something a little nicer that has a really nice sheen to it without having to worry about breaking the bank. One of the other stores that I ended up going towards was Kiki Textiles, and so I was able to pick up this really beautiful sort of satin charmeuse teal fabric. I absolutely loved the sheen on this, so I went ahead and bought a whole bunch of that. And also from the same store, I knew I needed a whole bunch of golds. The gold that I had on hand specifically for Meg was way too warm for the design, so I ended up picking up this beautiful dull gold, which I think is going to be perfect for a lot of the trim details that she has. And I ended up getting a bunch of it because you never need, or you always need gold. Now I do have a local Joann's that is near me. However, sometimes the selection can be a little lackluster or not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to be experimenting with her boot covers. I haven't decided exactly what kind of material that I want to make it out of. In the past, I would use some sort of stretch pleather. However, I did see some tutorials online that maybe I could make it out of a stiffer pleather. So I just ended up picking up about 2 yards of this brown pleather from Joann's. I didn't pick up too much of it only because I know that I can go get some more of it if I decided that I needed it, but I did not want to put all of my eggs in this basket and it was on sale. I never buy anything from a brick and mortar fabric store unless it's on sale. After I got the samples, I was able to narrow down specifically from one of my favorite stores, which is Big Z Fabrics. The fabric came in. So I really prefer to order the fabric in bulk all at once. Okay, so first up, yes. Okay, so this is my stretch brown pleather. So this was a little bit of a darker color than I originally wanted. However, I had a fair amount of this material on hand, which I actually ended up using to go ahead and make her belt. So I knew that I needed some sort of stretch material in order to do the weave, which this is just a 4-plait braid. But I went ahead and made this as a proof of concept to make sure that it was going to be something that I really like, that goes over her waist. But the color was a bit too dark for what I wanted for her boots. So that's part of the reason why I decided to try the other option. And unfortunately, this stretch pleather did not come in a warmer tone that I really liked. It was either way too warm and way too brown, or it was darker like this. If this doesn't end up working out, then I can always go back to my trusty stretch pleather and use that. Okay, what's next? Now, apparently I had the same idea and I didn't want to wait on Joann's. So, more pleather, more brown pleather. This one is definitely thicker and a little nicer than the stuff that I bought from Joann's. I think they were having a sale on this and that's part of the reason why I picked it up. Again, whenever you experiment, it's always really, really nice to, ooh, I really end up liking to experiment whenever I have the option via sales. So always keep an eye on that, especially for your more expensive fabrics. A lot of stores will run sales, so you don't actually have to make it terribly expensive. Speaking of sales, they had a sale on this teal scuba material, which I knew I didn't really want to make her hat out of anything too thick, which this is actually pretty thick, but she does have shorts that are almost matte and sort of in the same colors. The other reason why it is helpful to do samples is because sometimes you'll bring this stuff together and you'll drape it over to sit there and try and see a bit of the difference to make sure that the teal isn't too off, because sometimes a lot of these colors, like this one, is definitely more blue and the satiny color is a little more green. However, considering that this is just going to be on her shorts, I'm not really that concerned about it because she wears some really tiny shorts. So this will be a great sturdy material that I'm not going to have to worry about ripping the shorts, whereas something much more delicate like a charmeuse, which is what this is would probably be a little too fragile for something that you're actually going to be sitting on. And if this thing snags, it's going to be very apparent. This was on like super clearance, so I'm not terribly concerned that I have a whole bunch of it. Add it to the stash. Okay, part of the reason why that box was so big, faux fur. So she has a rather fluffy tail. So I went ahead and got this gorgeous, really long pile so that I'm gonna have plenty to be able to shave off and shape for her ears, which this is the same color as you can see from the sample that I got. And this is one of the reasons why the sample is so important, so that you can get an idea before you spend a whole bunch of money on one of these big ones. She also has a whole bunch of white faux fur around the trim of her collar and also on her ear and on the inside of her tail. I didn't really know exactly how much to get, so I just got more than I thought that I needed. So if I happen to mess up, I don't have to order more. And of course, because we can't do anything simple, her tail is multiple colors. So the top part of her tail is a much lighter color. So I went ahead and got this lighter color. The thought process is, I know that the transition here is actually pretty stark. However, I'll airbrush a transition from this, which is the main tail color, to sort of a lighter, more sun-bleached part of the top of the tail. We'll see if it works. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't, I can always end up ditching this and just remaking the tail out of this fabric instead of this one. Some fabrics are not terribly complicated to find. So what I always recommend is taking a look at some of your craft and hobby shops, especially if it's something that's a little more common that you'd be able to find, say a white cotton. The under part of her hat actually ends up having a whole bunch of like really cool tie-dye. So for that, I knew that I needed white cotton. Pretty easy to find. Weirdly enough, I didn't have any on hand. So I was able to go to Michael's and pick up just 1 yard of this fabric, of this white cotton. I did make sure that it was cotton so that whenever I go and I dye it, I know which dye to get. But I was pleasantly surprised, again, on sale. I think it was 50% off, or buy one, get one 50% off, which usually does apply to fabric as well. So if you need more than 1 yard, then you're able to take advantage of that. Again, I knew that that would be something that's very easy to find. Now for the jacket itself, it has a little bit more of a sheen, so I wanted to go with a cotton sateen fabric, which my local fabric store just didn't have. So I went ahead and ordered that. That's not here yet. It's pretty much just gonna be this with a slightly bit more of a sheen. Okay, so that's everything that I ended up picking up for Aurora. I am so excited to continue working on her. I have already done several of my muslin mock-ups to make sure that I have an idea of the fit and exactly how I want things to look. And if you want to stay the most up to date with what I'm doing, please check out my Instagram at HneBadger_cosplay. And I hope that you guys are as excited to see Aurora complete as I am. Until next time, happy cosplaying.